When we observe global events, the surface appears erratic. We see a sequence of crises, economic shocks, and cultural shifts that seem entirely reactive. But this turbulence is a deliberate optical illusion. Beneath that erratic surface, global power is driven by a highly structured mechanism. The chaos we perceive is the friction generated by a rigid architecture asserting itself over the entire natural world. To map that architecture, we must identify its root code. This is the foundational operating logic governing how hegemony manifests across every domain, from religion and governance to urban planning and language. This blueprint remains invisible because it is ubiquitous. It is integrated so thoroughly into the fabric of daily life that its mechanisms become transparent, appearing as the natural background of the modern world. Understanding power requires the analyst to move beyond isolated clues. The goal is to map the ontological infrastructure of the system itself. The primary mechanical engine of this root code is systemic inversion. This process involves an axiological reversal, a technique where a signifier is deliberately decoupled from its traditional referent. The symbol remains, but it is repurposed to serve the internal requirements of the power structure. Because the system relies on these mechanical manipulations, it leaves identifiable, recursive patterns. We can observe the blueprint by tracking 4 specific structural markers. First, look for recurrence across domains, identical archetypes appearing in both ancient governance and modern entertainment. Second, identify the structural inversion, the binary flip used to obfuscate true intent. Third is self-referentiality, where the system redefines language to create a closed loop of meaning. Finally, we observe cyclical closure, a temporal framework that dictates the terminal boundaries of an era through a managed reset. Isolating these markers transforms in a seemingly impenetrable hegemonic structure into a legible architecture. An abstract operating system requires physical anchors to project authority across history. It uses architectonic signatures to stabilize its influence over the temporal landscape. The system utilizes Babylonian templates of governance as its primary root. These structures were designed to rationalize the natural landscape into a singular, manageable grid, establishing the Tower of Babel as a node of totalized power. We see this structural rationalization in the ruins of ancient administration. The environment is conquered through geometry, creating a physical anchor for centralized power. This grid-based logic provides a semiotic bridge between ancient and modern authority. The Babylonian signatures evolved through imperial architectural standards, carrying the same geometric resonance into new eras. Modern civic structures utilize the great architect concept to maintain this continuity. By embedding these templates into the hearts of modern cities, the system ensures its underlying semiotic resonance remains operational, regardless of the regime in power. Physical geography is further coded through vertical markers that act as nodes of power. The obelisk functions as a vertical needle, asserting physical dominance over a local space. It is a recurring imperial signature that pins the universal blueprint to a specific topographic coordinate. This control extends horizontally through grid-based city layouts. By imposing mathematical uniformity, the system subsumes local, organic topography into its universal geometric design. This 1807 survey plan of New York City demonstrates this rationalization. The very geography of the island is overwritten by a manageable, rigid matrix. The ultimate extension of this geographic authority is the establishment of global meridian alignments. The blueprint codes the entire planet, tethering distinct nations to a centralized line of temporal control. While political regimes collapse, the underlying physical and spatial logic of this architecture remains operational, providing a continuous framework for the system's mechanical flips. Building on this physical foundation is the active mechanical engine of the root code, the flip. The flip creates a layer of cognitive dissonance that prevents the subject from identifying the source of agency. By reversing the values of a binary, the system ensures the visible manifestation of power is often the structural opposite of its functional reality. A foundational mechanism of this process is the lunar-solar inversion. In this configuration, the solar node represents public-facing exoteric power. The lunar node represents the reflective, esoteric agency that actually guides the cycle from behind the scenes. This inversion allows the system to change its visible face, the solar leader, without ever altering the underlying lunar engine that drives the cycle. The second major inversion applies predator-prey and alpha-beta dynamics to human populations. Framing social interaction through an alpha-beta lens justifies systemic stratification, presenting the resulting hierarchy as an immutable law of nature rather than a choice of the blueprint. By naturalizing social Darwinism, the system convinces the population that predatory competition is inevitable. This framing prevents the formation of collective resistance by making submission appear biologically necessary. By weaponizing these structural flips, the system successfully short-circuits challenges to its central authority. The system insulates itself by creating a closed loop of meaning, effectively hiding in plain sight. It redefines language so that any structural critique must utilize the system's own distorted vocabulary. This ensures that proposition remains contained within the system's boundaries. We see this in pop culture through the inverted hero's journey. Modern narratives often reward the character who adopts the predator archetype. This predator's ascension grooms the collective subconscious to accept predatory hierarchies as a form of winning, discarding the traditional hero's sacrifice for the many. This cultural conditioning extends into the politics of controlled dialectics through the above-below flip. In this spatial mapping of power, the top of the pyramid is structurally decoupled from the foundational base below. Political systems present two opposing beta options that both adhere to the same alpha blueprint. Regardless of the electoral outcome, the energy of the debate funnels upward to sustain the same disconnected capstone. In this closed loop, the political debate functions as the primary mechanism of concealment, ensuring that the central power remains unchallenged. A system built on inversion must eventually account for the exhaustion of its own structures. It manages this through a temporal framework of resets. Cyclical closure is the process by which an exhausted era is folded back into itself to begin a new iteration of the same root code. The reset begins with era maturity. The blueprint has reached maximum saturation, and its archetypes are fully normalized within the social fabric. This leads to stage 2, activation. The core mechanical flips are accelerated, intensifying cognitive dissonance until the resulting structural instability reaches a peak. This instability culminates in stage 3, the reset event. This is a managed societal breakdown designed to clear the ontological field. Stage 4 is reinitialization. The identical root code is reapplied to a new historical context under the guise of progress, starting the cycle anew. Managed structural collapse makes way for immediate reconstruction. The shock of the breakdown clears the field, allowing the system to reinitialize its core hierarchy. Systemic breakdown serves as the blueprint's most vital survival mechanism, ensuring the long-term continuity of the root code. We can now observe the architecture as a complete system: the physical Babylonian foundations, the mechanical axiological flips, and the temporal logic of cyclic resets. The root code functions as a legible architecture of power. It is accessible to anyone who applies a semiotic lens to its recursive patterns. Achieving transparency does not require the discovery of new facts. It requires the application of a framework that reveals the logic already operating in plain sight. When the grammar of the blueprint is understood, the system's ubiquity becomes its greatest vulnerability to the observer. Navigating this era requires the application of 3 strategic directives. Directive 1. Deconstruct the binary. Identify the specific flip used in global events to separate visible spectacle from hidden agency. Directive 2. Audit archetypal recurrence. Track how ancient imperial templates are actively being reinitialized in modern governance and urban nodes. Directive 3. Anticipate the closure. Evaluate the level of systemic saturation and cognitive dissonance to gauge the proximity of the next reset event. In an age of symbolic saturation, the system only holds power over those who cannot read its grammar. Intellectual liberation is achieved the moment one stops reacting to simulated chaos and begins mapping the underlying architecture.